Hello, everyone. Welcome back. It's Daylight Savings Time weekend. We are beyond thrilled. We have Jim Porter and Karen Elkins with us. We have two more team members that are behind the scenes. They're working through some technical issues, so keeping our fingers crossed about that. But as we begin today, this is a very, very big unit. So before we do our normal kickoff, it would be helpful if we could there's Miss Margaret also on our channel here today. If we could, we're going to just pause for a moment and meditate. That is the most important nugget of wisdom out of the entire home study course. And so we'll do it to the ocean sounds and simply relax into it here today. And we'll have that come up on the screen. And as you get settled there, I'd like you to just breathe in. And as you breathe out, become very anchored in your body. I'd like you to feel your fingers and feel your toes. And breathe in again. And as you breathe out, tune into that universal heartbeat. Becoming anchored with your shoulders and your neck. Coming right here to this moment, being centered. If you'll breathe in again. And as you breathe out, I'd like you to tune into that heartbeat, feeling the love in your heart for the universe, for others in humanity, for yourself. And as you tune into the ocean sounds here, open yourself up to the conversation that we'll be having here today. Very, very powerful, very big. And as you'll shake out your fingers and just relax into it this evening, having no preconceived ideas that you have to understand everything, but that you trust the universal flow of all things. Be thankful for everything with your body, from your head to your toes. Feel yourself anchored into your body. Invite in love and light. And may we get excited about what we're going to do here this evening. And when you are ready, please open your eyes. So we have quite a few things to cover here today. And when you look at I wanted to remind everybody of the quote that really drove us all. And so Karen, I'll ask if you'll read this particular quote that comes up about mediocrity. We'll see it in just a moment. I have it actually memorized. There you go. Mediocrity is self-inflicted and genius is self-bestowed. So I'll just go ahead and dive into that one. And so on the next page, Karen, if you would read this one so we remind everyone of the power of what we're talking about here today.
If you can read and count to 9, you can master the secrets of the universe. Those are those 9 beautiful octaves.
There you go. There you go. And wanted to remind everybody, hello, Kenneth. Hello, Bonnie. Hello, Western. Hello, Karen. So glad to have you all with us. And as we go into, just want to remind you all that we actually hone in on the man who tapped the secrets of the universe, as you'll see right there. And we focus for this particular broadcast on the home study course. And so on the home study course. And wanted to remind you all of where we are in March. Hard to believe here, we're in the second Sunday of March. And take a look at what it looks like today. Today, we're diving into lesson 37, a very, very big lesson. Hello, Miss Linda. And just to give you a reminder of what the whole lesson for this particular unit 10, take a look at that next slide there. And that's a little more detailed. You may even want to take a screenshot, a picture of that so that you have that with you and see what actually tunes into your heart. Before we dive into our lesson, though, I did want to bring something up. And so I'm going to see if we can bring on our other two panelists right quick. And as we do that, hello, John. Do we have you on board?
Okay, brother. Hello. See you in a bit.
All right. So hello, Ken. Hello, John. John, can you say hello? All right, so we can't hear him. He's still working through it. So that's just one of those things there. So let me go ahead and just remind us here. I wanted to show you something that went viral this week as they're working on some of the technical difficulties. When there was something that went viral there, and it was there was a Philadelphia Eagles ball player actually reading a book on the sidelines, and it was called Inner Excellence, and it went viral. The very next day, 500,000 copies were sold. And when I heard the interviewer, when I heard the author being interviewed, I couldn't help but be very intrigued by a particular clip. So let's see if we can bring that clip on.
One is that the heart is the key to your life. If you want to have the best possible life and be able to handle the most pressure and have peace and joy in any situation, you're going to need to get to your heart, because that's where your deepest fears are and your greatest dreams are, and where your subconscious is. Because everything that comes out of your mouth and your actions all comes from your heart.
So I had to chuckle because I was like, well, Walter Russell could have written Inner Excellence. So we're going to have a box of the man who tapped heading to the team, and we'll see who gets caught reading this on the sidelines in the future. So how exciting that will be, right? How exciting that will be. And so I'm curious. So Margaret, wanted to tap into just a quick comment as we begin and say this particular unit is all about the science of the cosmos. So if you could just give everyone a quick nugget about what was 1 through 9 versus we're making a marked shift here for Unit 10.
Yeah, I would say that the Russells want people to understand the behind the scenes mechanism so that they know how to live their life masterfully. Now, for the science, it gives you a greater detail of the actual mechanics of the universe and how matter is created. And so it gives, I would say, an even deeper knowledge of the mechanics, because if you have the philosophy, you can better understand the science. And I think if people would start with the philosophy and then move into the science, they would have a better, deeper experience.
All right, so very, very powerful. And I wanted to have us all pause for just a moment. So take a look at what the picture that I have on my screen right quick. And it's children. It's children laughing and dancing and just jumping for joy. And I wanted to go back for a moment and invite everybody before we dive into tonight. And remember with childlike wonder how your curiosity was when you were children. And many people, when we go into the science, I have run into the fact that there are many that begin to struggle with it, and they have this old predetermined idea in their head that they're not good at science. So I'm curious, I'm going to ask everybody in the chat box before we begin, on a scale of 1 to 10, how good were you at science when you were in school? With 1 being, Kim, I was lousy, I couldn't stand it, and 10 being, I was a science geek. I was all about the science. All about the science. And then I'm going to ask Ken to comment on this as well. So where were you on the chat box, please? And Ken, when we were talking about this today, you had a very important quote that you wanted to bring up that came from the unit talking about how science ties in. I'm going to bring that up right now and see what you think. It's right here on the screen. Ken?
Okay. Yeah. All down through in human justice, we are not blaming religion alone. For science and religion are father and mother mates, science being the father. All down the ages, man's discoveries in science have progressed our civilization to the point where a man's world is the resultant effect. Man has always been master of the world home, and man's nature to conquer has always suppressed the love nature of woman.
And so, Ken, as you and I were talking about this today, what we really wanted to remind, you see in the chat box, we have a lot of 1s and 2s and 3s, and you see some low numbers. So what we want to invite everyone here tonight is to relax into this, okay? Relax into the discussion, trust where the panel is taking you, and remember that deep down, you already know this. It's a reminder. It's an awakening. John, do we have your voice? We do not. We do not. Well, we try it again. All right. So So Ken, before we begin on the very first lesson here, anything else that you wanted to say? Because this morning you were talking about, even as one that you struggled with science at the beginning, that this is part of why this quote was so powerful to you, is because it goes together, science and religion.
Absolutely. I've been doing this since '95, and I remember initially thinking, God, this science, it's just not my thing. I got a 7th grade education. I just thought, all right, I'm going to postpone. I did what Margaret said, actually, and I really studied the philosophy before I really dived into the Universal One or other science books, and the Divine Iliad 1 and 2. I read a lot of books, but I stayed away from the science, believe it or not, for probably a good 25 years. And it's not that I didn't read it and we aren't learning as we go through the home study course, but I had that feeling of like, okay, I need to really get into this and know this language before I'm going to understand the science. And the funniest part of it is what we just read is science. The reason science is so necessary to know how and be one with God is, remember, it's natural science. It's not academic science. And that was what was in my head. One was academic, not natural. But to hear that science is the male and religion is the female, I know that Emmett Fox is a very popular writer, and a lot of people know of him. He had written a book called Sermon on the Mount. And in that Sermon on the Mount, his greatest desire and belief that when mankind was able to put religion and science together, that we would arrive at the ultimate society of
Yes.
men and women who loved each other. So that's why the science is so important, because you have to marry it with religion to be whole and complete and walk in duality with the divided and the undivided would be the terms we'd use.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to ask the panel right quick. We're still working on trying to get John on board, but Jim, just a quick comment, and then Karen, and then Margaret. What was your biggest takeaway, aha, out of this particular lesson this evening, lesson 37? Jim?
For me, when I was reading the part about how we first make it an intellectual understanding of the science, and secondly, we become cosmically aware. That's important for me to focus on, because I am intellectually pretty good on understanding science, but my cosmic side of it, my cosmic awareness is still pretty much in the intellectual state. And so if anybody's out there finding themselves in that place, and I meditate daily, at least 3 times. I've had, moments of flashes, but I've never had a flash that would
Okay.
just went through. So yeah, don't get frustrated. Just keep on going.
Okay. I'm curious, Karen, just a quick nugget from you.
For me, that was the part that it's all good. The part that punctuated for me was, how do you control matter? And if you understand, and matter is the matter of your mind and how your life will change if you understand the basic principles of the science.
All right. And Margaret, what was your favorite part?
Yeah, I would say that, there's 2 ways of motion, one toward integration and one toward nothingness. And I think it's the direction toward nothingness that gets overlooked. So in your daily life, if you take the time to decentrate, then your ability to concentrate is even greater. And I think science has overlooked that too. In other words, science will not harness the energy of what's moving out. They only want to harness with what's visible, what's moving in. So science overlooks that entirely.
Okay, so everybody breathe. We've got a big lesson. Shall we begin, dear ones? And hopefully maybe even John will get to call in on his phone, and we can try something like that. So perhaps we could at least have his voice. So
Jokes tonight.
I know. We won't have our scientific humor if we don't get John on somehow. All right. So if everybody,
I have a thought. I'm gonna get off the line here real quick and just talk to John, because I think I can get him on, a way to get him on.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. All right, so for the team, let's go ahead and dive into the prelude, please, and we'll have that pulled up on the screen. There were some important things in the prelude, and I'm going to just read the first part of it. We're down one team member, tech member behind the scenes as well, so if you'll just be patient with us as we move in there. We just need to pull up the home study course. just the home study course, not the quotes yet. And I'm going to go ahead and I can actually, until we pull it up.
John, pick up your phone.
Please mute Ken. All right, so the home study course here. So let's go ahead and we'll dive into it. It's not quite zooming in, so you know what? I'm going to go ahead to my document camera. Joey, if you'll just go ahead, please, and bring me on screen, and I'll use my document camera instead so that we can just go it from that way, please. Oh, there it is. Perfect. All right. So, Jim, if you would, please read those first 2 sentences all the way down to the knower of the cosmos.
Okay. We have now reached a crucial turning point in our endeavor to lead you to a full comprehension of your own personal identity as an extension of the God identity. We have entitled the preceding units The Science of Man. The purpose of the following units is to give you a complete understanding of your oneness with the God identity, by enabling you to transcend your physical man identity completely and thus become the knower of the cosmos instead of merely a thinking extension of the Creator. Shall I go on?
Yeah, go ahead. You can finish up that sentence.
Whose limitations of thinking are bounded by the ever-conscious fact that the man idea is but a part of the whole and not the whole.
And I'm going to skip down to the last sentence in that paragraph, if we'll scroll down just a bit there, Joey. And it says, you will then be a cosmic being who is one with the one cosmic being. And you will be that one and will knowingly be able to say, I and my Father are one. Now, what's interesting to me, please understand that we cannot read the entire home study course here, but I do want to jump down to that next highlighted sentence, the highlighted sentence there in yellow. And it says, all are living things and all are light, for naught is but light. And take a look at this next sentence in blue brackets, really important. Light is the one thing, the one intelligence, the one power in the universe. So let's pause for a moment to ask the panel, please. What does that mean? That's pretty powerful. Margaret?
That's just, the way I would interpret it is when people have kind of a flash or a good idea, it's seemingly coming out of nowhere. So that would be the still light, which is the one intelligence.
Okay. Jim?
Absolutely. The physical universe, we're constantly reminded by the Russells, is a projection of the idea of creation, but it is not creator. And so we need to stay focused on that. They also pointed out in there that I just read how important it is to become a cosmic thinker. I'm at the point in my life when I have a thought or an idea, I generally, not always, but generally see myself presenting that thought or idea to the God light that centers all of us. And I think eventually that's where the illumining and the awakening will come.
Yes. I completely agree with that. Karen?
We're all made from the light spectrum. We're all basic crystalline light. And so we come from the prism. And so you'll see even in religions that lots of times the Godhead has the triangle. That means light. And we're projections of that. So it's not that, so everything is from that one intelligence. It is from the light, the center.
Okay.
And that
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it is the power of the universe and its waves and its octaves and how it makes things.
Well, and so what's interesting, Karen, is you always bring a neat perspective that is other ways of kind of synthesizing the information, whereas we have a lot of pure resilient students. So I think it's very interesting to see the dichotomy because I actually think over there on the prelude, I was going to ask if you could, let's go on, scroll down to the next page, if we could, Joey. And it says the greatest contribution, if we'll scroll down just a bit there, because in that one little bracketed sentence. Karen?
The greatest contribution any human can make for the human race tendency is to give a dynamic description of God, which will withstand the tests demanded by the laboratory methods and the standards, which exactly what this is. This is the prism. We are in the hologram. We live in this simulated light show. So
All right, so let's go on down. I'm gonna continue to the next highlighted. It says, "For one must first know God's method and processes before one can intellectually comprehend God." And I thought that was really, really important. And in that next sentence, it talks about that even then, one will not know the spiritual God until he has been enabled to become God by completely severing his physical self from his cosmic self. Can everyone please type in the chat box cosmic self? And Ken, I'm going to ask you to comment on this. For an intellectual comprehension is still bounded by body awareness, while cosmic comprehension is not. Ken?
Yeah. Hon, I missed that paragraph. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine. I'll go ahead and jump down. That's fine. That's perfectly fine. I'm just waiting to see when
apologize. I was trying to get John in there. I just missed it.
All right. So let's go ahead and jump down, Margaret. Let's go, Jen. Let's down to lesson 37. Those things.
We got John back, though. I do know we got John back now.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay.
John, can we hear you?
I don't know. Can you?
We can.
Nice job.
All right.
Keep your finger on. Keep your finger off the camera, homeboy.
Good.
Our cosmic humor is back.
All right. So John, there's always there's a will, there's a way. So Joey, if we'll go ahead and scroll down to the top of page 37. Thank you everyone for your patience. You know, we do this every week, and even when we think we have everything right, it's just sometimes those things happen. All right. So Jim, if you could, please read those first two paragraphs.
The supreme need of the human race at this stage of its unfolding is the discovery of the existence and identity of a comprehensible God by methods and processes which will meet the requirements and standards demanded in the laboratories of science as well as within the heart and consciousness of man. The tragedy of modern science is that it has already made this supreme discovery, but it is not aware of it. Because of the present day misconception of the universe, which the creator built in the image of cosmic imagining and God, and of God.
Keep going, scroll down, Joey. And just until to that first two sentences there.
And of God himself, whom religion has pictured as an angry God of wrath, who wreaks vengeance upon so-called sinners instead of conceiving him as a God of light and love. Fear has been created by man, which leads to war and preying of man upon man, and is the dominant note upon which our civilizations have been constructed.
Thank you, Jim. And I love that next sentence. As long as fear dominates the human race instead of love, it will create disunity, which is the characteristics of its many religions. So let me pause for a moment, because this is really important. As I've watched people come into this particular museum, is they're working really hard to have us understand the science and the philosophy, the science and the spirituality. And so I'd like to ask John to comment. One of the comments that people get when they come in here is they ask, oh, is this a branch of Scientology? And that is not, it's not at all. So let's go ahead and just dive into that. About anybody who's got any concern about that, why was it that the Russells were focusing in on the science? John?
Well, the only way you're going to be able to verify God is to do it scientifically. And that's what the Russells did. And this message has nothing to do with Scientology. Scientology doesn't know anything about God. They couldn't scientifically explain God to you if you put $100 million in front of them.
Well, I thought it was interesting, John. So, Joey, if we could, if we think about this, if I were to call you and I was living in some middle of the world and I called you, John, and you picked up and started talking to me, if I didn't understand the science, I would say that you were channeling to me because I had no comprehension of what a phone was, a device was, but this was an understanding of science. And so when we think about all the inventions of the world, it is an understanding of science. Margaret?
Yes, I think, I view God as a universal equilibrium. And so, science is very technical, but natural science is very simple. And so there's an equilibrium in every action of life. There's an equilibrium. And so I think if you think of the stillness as an ultimate, I guess, zero. You could call it a zero or an ultimate stillness that governs everything. So the science is quite simple if you look at it in respect to the Trinity, Mother,
Okay.
Mother, Father, and the zero.
That's very powerfully said, Margaret. And in fact, I wanted to go ahead on that page and jump down to where there on page 720, I have it circled and highlighted in yellow. Deeper still than science, which should have discovered the God of love, balance, or religion, which created a God of fear and wrath, is the basic cause of man's self-made troubles. And that is man himself who strayed. Scroll down, Joey. That is man himself who strayed from God's natural law at the dawn of consciousness and has continued to do so to this very day. And they even go on to say that Alexis Carrel was right in saying that all of man's institutions, and this includes government, industry, education, and home relations, were man-governed and out of balance with themselves and with each other, and must therefore be changed to obey the laws of nature. So let's talk about this for a moment, panel, because one of the things that I know I've been talking about to corporate, and Karen, I'll go right to you, is one of the things I've been talking to at corporate is that everything we need to know about leadership is within nature. That truly, if we truly understood the flow of nature and the power of nature and could shift our entire leadership principles to nature, it would be incredibly different. So I'll ask the panel for some thoughts. Karen?
Yeah, I think what people don't know is some of our founding fathers is what they call deists. And deists actually were still men of religion, but they believed fundamentally in natural law. And their philosophy was done. And America was actually at that point with the Constitution trying to create that balance when it created the founding, so it wouldn't be out of balance. That was the intention. And part of it came from the Cherokee Nation, which was actually a very male-female tribe.
Interesting. Ken? John?
Yes.
Ken, go ahead, John. And then after that, I was going to ask John for his thought on this whole idea.
Yeah, I think that we missed that paragraph above, which I really love, in just that last line above the deeper still there on page 720.
Well, that's why we kicked off with that earlier today. I skipped over it.
No, I know, love. I just was about the women. I think this is important for women and for men. And it states in here, the very last line, that man has always been master of the world home, and man's nature to conquer has always suppressed the love nature of woman. And so that's why the feminine and the masculine is so important, and they are so equal. And probably, what the Russells were stating, is the imbalance, especially in politics at that time, let alone now, of the male-female balance. So when we get into this idea of religion and science, is again, I encourage everyone to not be afraid of the science. It comes organically. It comes through talking about it. That's what the podcast is all about. We didn't have this podcast to help understand what these paragraphs mean. So what you're going to get into is a real practical application, but just as Margaret was saying, this is not science. So I know it's almost like you want to say natural science. That's almost needs to be prefaced with that, so there's nobody balking at it. But to realize that science and religion need to get together to create this union, because science can prove the existence of God. And that's what in this home study course you'll see a picture of a water molecule that was broken down and magnified by an atomic microscope that they had at the time, a very powerful microscope. And it actually refers to an example of God, of seeing God in the elements. And therefore, Walter also believed that man will arrive at the point where we will prove the existence of God. And it will be the God of love. That will be the proof. And thus science will prove that. And think about how science was done with love, how much different of a world we might live in.
Very well said. And John, during your tenure as the president of the University of Science and Philosophy, you actually had a chance to see that kind of proof of the divine, of the creator.
Yes. I want to, I wish that this damn home study course was downloaded to AI, and we could ask it how many times the word balance is mentioned in the home study course.
I can find that out for you. Go
I can-
ahead. I'll do that during our break.
All right. And but that is where everything starts. That's where everything ends, is seeking balance. So between your physical body and the spiritual you, trying to find that balance moment to moment, you know, daily, whatever. And that is the key. And I agree with Ken. We don't have to, you shouldn't fear the science. That's why we opened up the show. If you can read and count to 9, you can master the secrets of the universe. And it's that simple. So be open your mind, and you'll be, and you will be rewarded.
You know what's so simple, John?
Yes.
When you look at that Godhead and we look at the triangle, which makes light, water triangulates, it starts in tetrahedral structures. The prism of light is based on 3 colors, and water actually triangulates, and that is your recycling system, and the only difference is density. So it's all one thing. It's all light.
All right. So that's a perfect segue to our first break, believe it or not. And boy, do we have a lot to cover. So just put on your bootstraps, go take your 3-minute break. I'm going to find out how many times balance is mentioned, and we will come back again. And for those of you that have your copy of the home study course, we'll be back on page 721. And it means that we still have another 20 pages to go. See you in three minutes.
There's lots of pictures.
All right. If you will find your way back, find your way back. So here's an intriguing thought for you. I did go ask how many times this was actually in the home study course. And you're going to love this one, John. The word balance or balanced is in the home study course 321 times. 3, 2, 1.
Wow.
Wow.
Fascinating. We couldn't have planned that any better. Perhaps the creator did. All right. So let's dive in, shall we? So let's jump down. I'm going to go to the bottom of page 721 here and the yellow highlight. And I want to start by reading this sentence. It goes on down to the bottom of page 721. Keep going, please. Yes, right there. Go up a little bit, Joey. All right, there, yellow highlight. Thank you. The rest of this course is therefore devoted to the way international science has reached its highest pinnacle of success in commanding matter to do its bidding and obey its will without knowing the why, and yet being very skilled in knowing the how. And so it goes on down to where the green highlight is, an optical. Okay, so creation must henceforth be looked upon as a universe of mind imaginings having no reality, and be known as an optical universe of gravity-controlled light. For God is light, and God's mind thinks in waves of light. All right, so I'm going to pause for a moment and ask the panel to comment on that one. That one's loaded. Who wants to dive into it first? Jim?
Well, that is who we are, that light. And it's learning to be aware of that fact and making it your general state of mind as you go through life. It's a practice. That's where the meditation comes in. And the prayer is putting that knowing into manifesting things. I don't know any other way to say it. It's being aware that you are not the body you are walking around in.
All right, Margaret, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would say, Walter Russell is saying it's an optical universe, a gravity-controlled light. And so he said that man wants to put everything in a cylinder, like they coil their motors with a straight cylinder. But Walter Russell sees it as an optical universe. So he says if they were to focus the coils in a conical fashion, they could harness even greater energy or greater control. So that's what he means by saying it's an optical universe of gravity-controlled light. Since everything is light, you want to focus it optically in a conical coil.
Okay, so are you saying conical very much like the way the shape is? Okay,
right.
So that's why this is such an important part of what the Russell teachings are about, is funneling in like this.
Right, and they always say it's giving for re-giving, and so one half is focusing, and simultaneously it's expanding.
Yes.
And it's simultaneous. That's why it's so tricky. So it's giving for simultaneous re-giving. And
we're going to show that a little bit later in this lesson, Margaret, because you're right. That one is a difficult one. I even had to draw some of it out and talk through some other students about it because it was difficult for me. John, last comment before I have Ken read section 1 on page 722. You're on mute. If you could unmute you. All right, so there you are.
Am I good?
You're good.
All right. So optics, lenses, cubes, spheres, those are the tools. Those are the objects that God uses to bring this mind projected image universe into being. And without those lenses, it'd be chaos. And so gravity is synonymous with God, and it's a two-way. Gravity takes that image and splits it two ways, inward and outwards, male, female, compression, expansion, magnetic, electric. And so once we can start associating those terms with the effects, it'll move all of us forward.
Okay. All right. So these are pretty big concepts. I do want to show you all something right quick. So I'm going to ask people online if you want to just take a quick shot of this. So Joey, if you'll make my screen large. So this was my attempt to take a lot of the things that you all have been talking about and put it on one page. So whatever I've been learning from these folks, so just take a quick shot. We'll come back to this later. This was Kim's attempt. Karen helped me pull this together because what John and Jim and the rest of them have done, I'm going to go back to my camera in just a minute. What they've done is, as I've been listening to them for years, I, as a new student, was having difficulty of putting all these concepts into one place. And so that's what you just did right there. And we're going to unpack this one step at a time. And that was like a little Cliff Note version. But let's go ahead and that way, if anybody's making notes and maybe even on your iPad, you can make.
Can I just make one suggestion on your little picture? I hate to say it. There is no depth. There's refolding and unfolding.
Okay, I'll change that word. I'll change it to refolding.
That kind of
Sure.
gets a little misleading.
I'll change it to refolding. Absolutely.
Kim,
All right.
Kimberly, there's one thing you pick, your toy.
Yes.
Pick up your toy. Hold one of them, just one of them. Imagine that one side of it had a color band that equated with the image behind Kimberly. If you can keep, I don't know if you can keep two of us. The image behind Kimberly shows the waves and the color bands within the waves. So Kimberly, hold up your toy. And in that color band, you would see all of those colors in that red, and they would be fusing together. And that way you would see the 9 octaves of colors, because every single one of them will show you from hot to cold.
Okay. And that, yes.
You know what I'm saying?
All right. I'm doing the best I can there. Let's see what we can do there. All right. So Ken, let's go ahead. If you would read that issue number 1 on page 722.
Okay, I just want to comment real quick on the optical universe, and maybe to help people to give a little better view. Think of going to a movie, and right, you know what a movie projector is projecting, it's got film in it, and then the projecting a white light, and the film goes down in front of that white light. Well, that white light is a lens, and it's a convex lens to make the image bigger on the screen. If you can imagine, it's got to project, right? So that lens, and it's so similar to a magnifying glass. Think of a magnifying glass, and if you take a magnifying glass and you hold the sun to the sun, and you move that magnifying glass up and down, you literally, once you get to a point, John and I were doing this just not too long ago, it actually will make a cone out of the bead of light if you hold it just at the right point. And then you can see also how the magnifying glass tapers and conical light as you pull it back to get that point. Well, it's a cone that is coming down to that point. You can't see the cone, but you can almost see you can see it on the ground if you pull the magnifying glass back just a wee bit off of that hot point. So that's what it means optical. So God's thinking is just like that projector. It projects that white light in the imagining are the film strips, and each image is an imagining that God has imagined and light projected through that film image to that negative to create a positive image on the screen. But the negative is actually in reverse. So that's what it means by it's everything is mirrored universe. So and if you look at the negative, your left hand is on the right side and your right hand is on the left side. But when you're projected on the screen, it thus reverses, and that's the similarity of optics. That's optical universe. So I also like to think of a globe, and Ralter's got a drawing where he takes a sphere and he cuts it into 9 sections, and it shows you convex and bioconvex lenses that multiply. That's what it means optical. It's dealing with convex and bioconvex lenses that project light and condense it and expand it.
All right, so I'm going to ask the group. So just a moment. He said negative. So we all remember those negatives. Anybody remember the negatives from pictures from a long time ago, team? Any of you? Can I see a show of hands? I can see a whole screen. So I mean, everything was always in reverse. So we really do know many of these things. And I slow us down for just a moment because it's really almost comical about how obvious these things are once we're teaching and we're learning and we're studying this together. Does that ring a bell, John?
Yeah,
it does. Now, that doesn't mean I'm the oldest one on the panel.
But you know,
so I'm going to ask everybody in the chat box to please go ahead and pull up. Do you remember negatives? So just make us feel a little bit less, not so lonely here. Do you remember the negatives from a long time ago with the cameras? So have a little bit of fun with that there. All right. So let's go ahead and dive in. So Ken, if we could go back to the postulate 1
Sure.
there on page 722.
The secret of creation lies within the light waves of motion, which gravity compresses into rings of light, in which density first increases towards the outside by thrusting outward from within until the centering holes have been closed into hot spheres. Density then increases in the inward direction. This is accomplished by the octave wave process, which multiplies the power by projecting it from stillness, the stillness of its mind source. And I'll say that again. This is accomplished by the octave wave process. So we know there's 9 octave waves, which multiplies power by projecting it from the stillness of its mind source, which is the mind source is God, by dividing it into mated pairs, which science calls the elements of matter. This constitutes the sex principle of life, which science has so strangely neglected to observe as being the basic factor of motion. This clarifies the meaning of the divided curved universe of motion from the undivided universe of rest, which the illuminates, sages, and prophets of the ages have tried to define. And
Okay.
then there's a figure.
All right, so let's stop. Let's just stop right there, and because she refers to the figure 34. So if we could, Joey, let's go ahead and pull up that image there that I have, and I want to ask the team if they'll actually explain it. So this is slide number 22. It comes straight from the home study course, and so who wants to tackle diving into that conversation there as we get ready to pull up that image?
Let me try and simplify it for our audience.
Okay.
It's real simple. Don't let that beautiful colored graph confuse you. So you're taking idea, projecting it onto the screen of space. You're compressing it to where it becomes incandescent, and that's what the red is, the male and the compression. And then as you continue on the wave, then it is an outward thrust, centrifugal, magnetic, female, back to the coldness of space, only to repeat itself over and over and over again. And it's that simple. It is that simple. And then you can see, just for curiosity's sake, if you look there, it says wave geometry, and you'll see it has elements listed.
Whoops.
All right. And that's what he calls locked potentials. So lithium is locked in that position on the wave. Gyroscopically, it's there, spinning, speed of light, locked in. And that's why Doc can identify at that particular point. So all the elements through all 9 octaves are locked in their position along the wave where they belong to in opposite pairs.
So let me ask you, John, go ahead, Joey, and go to scroll to slide 23, because the next image, the first image was actually what was in the home study course. Slide 23 is an actual picture of this drawing here at the Waynesboro, at the Russell Museum here in Waynesboro, Virginia. But John, I pulled up one of Russell's older drawings that is actually not displayed here. This is in the archives. Take a look at 24. And I was just curious if this might help people explain it a little bit more. I'm just showing it to you for conversation and asking the team, the panel, to mention. Just to me, it seemed like this was a simpler variation of what we just saw.
Yeah, you can use.
I would comment on that.
Go ahead, John, and then I'll go to Ken.
Well, power is rest, so that's omnipotence. That's God. Period.
Okay.
So now,
I'll take.
All right, I'll go to Ken, and then I'm going to Karen. Go ahead, Ken, and then I'll go to Karen.
Okay, he can bring that image back up, Joey, if you would. That straight line is God. And all of that motion and that wave is borrowed energy from that straight line. And those circles in that straight line represent an idea. Every one of those circles is an idea. And that circle has a north, a south, and the equator is east and west, as it's eternal, as all east and west is always eternal. When you think of the planet, it continues to go. So to simplify this is to realize, okay, so God is the equatorial plane, and Margaret had mentioned that. is always about the fulcrum, that fulcrum, right? Imagine that straight line being the ground and you're standing on it. If you jump, you can jump a certain height, but you're also returned back to the ground the same speed at which you jumped, because you can only seemingly separate from your equatorial grounding mechanism. So we can do things in life we want to do, but to truly live life gloriously and with love, there has to be a comprehension of how to plan it together. How do things come together? Now, you take sodium chloride, it's table salt. Sodium and chloride are two elements. One is male, one is female. And so the sodium is male and the chloride is female. And in that exchange, when those two get together, there's other elements that would get together with sodium, bromine, fluorine, and other than chloride.
Okay.
But when those other elements are in the room, sodium and chloride will always find each other because they're true mates. And in those elements, you can see how salt is made, and it's made with a male and a female. And the reason it's such a perfect element, and Christ said, be the salt of the earth, is because it represents the perfect shape. A cube is the maximum space anything can occupy before it explodes. And it's also things we use in measurement. The cube represents all measurement because of its perfect diameters.
So the challenge whenever we're working with seasoned students, as you can see here, 30, 40, 50-year students, and Karen, I'm going to come to you, and then I'm going to ask Margaret to weigh in. The challenge is they've already been through all 12 units many, many times. So they cannot help but themselves but to describe things in a much larger context because this has been part of their study. So they tend to go all the way when they're talking, and please have confidence and faith in yourself, pun intended, that you will someday be able to have this kind of understanding, because what they're doing when they describe things is they're zipping right on through the home study course and back again. Karen, and then Margaret.
I want to go back to the picture with the wave and the cubes.
Okay, so back from the one that's on page 20. So that's slide 23.
So the cube, I had to learn this from John too, is the God container. And when you look at the wave going up and down, here's what I want you to imagine. There's mountains. These are all mountains. And that's a stream. You've never seen a stream go straight. It always goes up and down and up and down. And the reason is it goes from hot to cold to hot and cold. So when you imagine a mountain range, you always know that the one side is the desert and on the other side is the forest. Why? Because one gathers it all and the other then depletes it. But it creates the cycle of mountains to desert to mountains to desert. It's the same way the air currents go. So it's the way God creates and the way he balances things out. So that's where I put it in a very simple way from my mind.
All right. Thank you. Margaret?
Yeah, my best way to explain this diagram is that if you visualize the compressive force coming inward and the simultaneous expansive force going outward, there's going to be periods of resistance to that motion. And then those levels of resistance represents each of those elements, the locking points that John mentioned. Now, when you come to the very center where you see that small red sun, that's incandescent carbon. So that's true balance with the male female. So the still white light is in the very center of the sun, which is incandescent carbon, as they say. Now, when those locking points dissipate and go more toward the blue side, or you have the expansive side of the wave that's taking predominance, then you have another set of locking points, and that's where you see the fluorine on the blue side. So there are really levels of resistance between the inward and the outward. And so that's why it's creating the elements, in other words.
Okay. Wow. So let me just ask everybody. I love the way everybody, do you notice? I want to ask everybody in the chat box, do you notice how everybody, Joey, if we'll go to the panel, do you notice how everybody begins to interpret? And to me, that's part of the joy of this journey. I'll be honest with you. Every single Russell student that I think walks in here and sees these images, and everyone that does studies the home study course, their unique perspective, their kaleidoscope of life has given them a different filter to be able to see things. And you just heard all of these people begin to say and interpret things differently. Jim?
Can you go back to the chart again, please?
Okay. Slide 23.
If you note the line running down the center, that's the I am without all things controlling them, universal one. And if you'll note, from that inert gas at 0, it radiates inward as dominant. From that stillness at 0, it radiates inward as dominant male, red, until it reaches the peak of that wave.
So, Jim, I want to make sure that I understand. You're talking about this line right here.
I can't see anything.
This one right here.
Yeah, that's the stillness of the universal one, unmanifested.
Okay.
Now the red line is now moving in as dominant masculine. Feminine is present. See the void all around it? Feminine is present, but masculine is dominant until it hits that 4.5 point, 4++.
Ah.
What happens? Masculine ceases to be the dominant and feminine takes over. The give has taken place in the masculine feminine. The re-give has taken place in the feminine masculine, back down to 0 again. And then it repeats itself. Give, re-give, give, re-give.
Give, re-give, give,
the
re-give.
Peak of each wave and the trough of each wave. The peak of each wave is God manifested. The trough of each wave is God remanifesting, and then back again. So it's, if you'll notice, it's masculine, feminine, masculine, feminine, masculine, feminine. Give, re-give, give, re-give, give, re-give. It's on created divinity, and it's created divinity within body. That's all that's happening there. It's an in-breath and an out-breath.
An in-breath and an out-breath. And so that's what I'd like to encourage everyone. This is part of why we do the meditation at the beginning, is going back to that universal heartbeat of an in-breath and an out-breath. So don't let all of these things overwhelm you. It's more language. Trust yourself as you're going through this, but it is as simple as the in-breath and the out-breath. Is it not, team?
It is.
Okay. All right. Big conversations here. We're supposed to take a break again in just a few moments, but let's see if we can dive into a little bit more here as we go through.
Thank you, Jim, for that.
All right. So, yes, John?
I said, is there any way Jim could repeat that whole thing for us?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So let me go ahead and because what they're talking about, let's go to the bottom of page 722, because then they go into a second key point, and we're going to dive more into this. And there's so much to do here with the conversation.
You got lots to do.
Yeah, we have much to do. And you know what? I would like right quick. Let's go ahead and pull up Karen Mahan's comment right quick, Joey. And it says this: I use salt stones in my body work, and I found that is not the heat, but the salt that totally allows their body to relax. I now understand. Isn't that a joyful discovery? That's what's so interesting to me about the Russell work, is that it really does give answers to things that we've known pieces of, and the Russell work gives us the science behind it, and that's part of the power of it. So John, if you could, I don't know whether or not you can read enough. Do you have your copy of Unit 10 with you, and go to the bottom of page 722?
I do.
All right. If you would read that section for number 2 there to the last line on that page.
I can do that. Failure to recognize the secret of life as being the sex principle, which lies within the motion of light waves. The alternating sequences of compression and expansion are the very cause of motion, as indicated by their sequentially equally interchanging inbreathings and outbreathings. It is these very generative compressive inbreathings from the cold of space which cause the multiplication of heat in your body or in the body of the sun. Radiative outbreathings then divide it by expansion.
All right. So John, comment on that before we take our break.
Well, let's keep it real simple. Everybody knows an in-breath and an out-breath. So how do you think heat is generated in your body? Right? So when you take air in, your lungs, if you follow them, it compresses that gas, and in that compression, it generates heat. And then your body takes that heat, and in your outward breathing, okay, it's cooler. And that's how your body heats and cools. It's just a little pump. Compression, expansion. It's that simple. Whether it's galactic or microscopic, it's all the same principle.
Okay, compression, expansion. So if everybody would in the chat box write down that compression and expansion. So just get comfortable with those words. Margaret?
Oh, I was just going to say, if you could also realize that when you breathe in, the universe is breathing out. That's the invisible part that's
All right, say
always
that again.
overlooked.
Say that again, Margaret, really slow because that was powerful.
Okay, yeah. So when we breathe in, the universe is breathing out.
Wow.
When we breathe out, the universe is breathing in. So it's that simultaneous motion that is always overlooked. We see one direction all the time, but there's always a simultaneous two directions. We only see one of the directions.
That's an amazing concept for everyone to leave here thinking. When I breathe in, the universe breathes out.
Right.
When the
because
universe breathes out, I'm breathing in. Wow.
Right. Right.
You know, another good term that simplifies it too is when I breathe in, I wind up, and when I breathe out, I unwind. And that is the two motions of the universe. And therefore, everything that you wind up will unwind, and everything that's unwinding will wind up one more time. And that's what that wave principle was about. Why it was red and blue. It's both are set in motion. The male and the female, the beginning and the end are all in that one idea. And like Jim said, when it reaches that 90-degree point, that's its maximum potential where it's achieved as far as it can. And now it must return back to whence it came.
Okay, so big conversation. We're getting ready to take our break, and we're going to come back to the bottom of page 724. So I'm going to go ahead and give everyone heads up. This podcast is going to go for at least another hour. It will not be all the way to 8:30. So for everybody, go ahead and do what you need to do. Grab some water, grab some food. If you're not able to stay with us the whole time, that is okay. You can tune in later, but this is too important to rush. Do know that Karen does have a visual journey that will help us assimilate all of this, okay, whenever at the end of the session. So just simply enjoy, and as you go on your break, invite in greater understanding, and remember to stay centered in your heart. We will see you in 3. Right, if you'll find your way back, please. Find your way back. Okay. These are big concept. John now has gone. All right, John. So indulge us in what you're sharing us with us there. You're on mute, John. He's like, dang it.
Hi.
All right, John, we can hear you now.
All right. Anyway, I just wanted to show folks the sphere being compressed, hot, molten, and then we'll give you the opposite of it, right?
Look at you with your bright colored toys.
Blue, yeah.
Honey, we have one here.
These are the practical examples of what we're talking about, and you can have fun with it. So try not to get too uptight and too tense about it.
I think that's a really important point, John. And John really does have lots of toys. Jim, you've got your whole slew of toys. I know that we have tons of toys. Margaret, I'm sure you have a few places there. What happens is that you end up trying to have your brain, really enjoy these creative ideas under the natural science, and all of those things, like what John just showed you, are really a lot of fun. That's why we keep creating, and we'll continue to create all kinds of new things. All right, so team, if we could jump down here, and I'm going to ask, so while we're here, I'm going to ask John to look ahead. If you will look ahead on page 727 and 728 while we're reading, and help me figure out the next step. Ken, if you would, talk about this idea of magnetism on the bottom of page 724, where I have it the yellow bracket, because it talks about the term magnetism is unjustifiable, and this is where the word gravity is introduced.
Okay. The term magnetism is so unjustifiable. The word gravity should be used instead. For gravity both multiplies and divides by thrusting inward from without to compress, and outward from within to expand. In this manner, gravity controls light by controlling its curvature. And mind also controls gravity by limiting both outward thrust to the cube mirrored planes of zero curvature, which we will make much of later. See figures 35 through 38. This is in complete opposition to the Newton law of gravity, which claims that gravity pulls inward towards the center and that matter attracts matter. It is also in opposition to the second law of thermodynamics, which claims that energy cannot run uphill but only downhill.
All right, so let's go ahead and scroll down to those images. So Joey, continue to scroll down, and let's take a look at page, so image 35, 36. You know what, I'm afraid it might be too big on your screen, Joey. So there, yeah, it's gonna be too big for your screen. So let's instead go to the slides. I was worried about this, so we had it prepared.
You shrunk it down, love.
Okay, wonderful. So talk us through what's there. Ken, just have them go through those next 3 pages so we can see the images before we discuss this concept.
Yeah, and the reason that we lose this right here, this image right here, Joey, stay here, really helps you to understand that gravity, and if you look in the right-hand corner there, right-hand side, near the top, says gravity, expands, and gravity compresses. So gravity is desire force of God, as Jim has said. I am within all things centering them, that's gravity, and outside all things controlling them, that's gravity. So it compresses and expands, and that's the tool that God used to manifest duality. Gravity is desire force. So it's like when you think about what's in your life right now, and as you've heard through, I'm sure, a lot of sayings, you bring in what you think and so forth. It's true that thinking represents repetition, and you gravitate negativity towards yourself or positivity towards yourself, depending on your thought life. That's why it's so important to develop an awareness, and why you hear so much about how thought life is everything, and how the knowing mind is so important, and that our thoughts are the key to who we are. And ideally, within this message, we're being taught to not think of ourselves by ourselves anymore, but to think with God, as it's been stated, so we become one. Therefore,
Okay.
I hope that's kind of answering the question. That oneness and that cyclonic
All
effect
right.
is important. Now, one more thing on gravity, which is really great that I really love today, is illustrated. Think of a magnet, and you got your male and your female side, and then within the center of that magnet is stillness. A magnet is another way of saying a gravity bar, because it both has male and female, and it has gravitational forces, and it also expands. So it's really interesting to see that a magnetic bar represents gravity. If you want to know what gravity is, that's why gravity compresses and expands. And I again call it the desire force of God. Just like your desires will gravitate to you in your life, those things you either think about, which is another way of desiring. If you think I'm going to go broke, I have no money, I'm never going to have money, that will gravitate that into your life. If I think I'm abundant, I have a full life, I have so much to be
Okay.
grateful for, then you'll gravitate that type of energy in your life and those kinds of things.
So I'm going to ask the group, you see me drawing out what this was because I asked the team about this earlier. So for the other panelists, I'd like you to focus in on this image, please, and helping people understand what is actually here, because there's something very powerful. Who else wants to chime in?
I would say what's so lovely about this image, it's people can really visualize a tornado with this image.
Yes.
And what's interesting is, it becomes increasingly faster and faster as you get to the point. And then the simultaneous expansion is actually happening around the gravity shaft. Walter Russell has the line going right down the middle. If you were to go into a tornado, it would shoot you right out the top. So the expansion is actually shooting right out the top. So we see the compression, right? But the expansion is just as forceful, right? Coming straight out the top of that tornado.
Well, and one thing that I found especially important to me as a newer student, I'm in my 4th time studying this, is I actually found, and this word really hit home, and this is what I think is so intriguing as we go through some of this, and I'll ask the rest of the team to comment, is that it actually, when we read through this, it says heat and density are greatest on the outside from pressure exerted outwardly from the inside until the compression from the
Outside, yes,
outside closes the hole. After that takes place, continued compression causes heat and density to increase inwardly, thus creating suns. And so I wanted to ask the group about this. What does that mean? Because many people have heard things about a sun, central sun, suns. I'm just curious that the whole process of creation creates suns. Who wants to chime in? Can I see the panel?
I would offer that, and that's why they use the tire analogy a lot, because when you compress air into a tire, it hits the sidewalls first, and then as you increase the pressure accumulates within the tire. And so in the same way that this is creating it's becoming so compressed that everything is heating up, and it's actually coming from both directions, not just from the top, but there's a simultaneous one coming from the bottom, because you have to have again a balance between the male and female. So it is hard to convey it, though. I always have trouble. I can visualize it in my mind, but it is hard to convey it.
There's a good paragraph on 725. The second paragraph says pretty much what Margaret was saying in probably a little more clarity. If you want, I'll be glad to read that.
Sure. Let's go on to 725. And then after we read that, Karen, I know you have a thought.
Okay. No scientist can create energy by pulling it inward from within. It must be produced by thrusting inward from without. As an automobile tire is pumped, that means by compression. If the tire were made of metal, which could not be burst by that compressive inward thrust, it would cause it to create a ring of intensely hot visible light at its center, and density would then increase inwardly as stars and planets increase their density in the inward direction. Science has already done this, but does not admit that the energy thus created was projected into it, for science claims that matter itself is energy. And that's what we talked about before, that there's only one direction, and that is to push. Everything, the compression is pushing things towards the center, and expansion is pushing things towards the boundaries in which it came from.
Okay.
So, in terms of that, go ahead.
Karen, you had a thought you wanted to chime in as well, and then I'm going to skip us all ahead to page 731.
Feynman basically said there's more power in the drop of a teacup than there is in all the ocean. So when you compress and compress and compress and compress, you create so much tension and so much heat. What happens? You're going to make your sun. You're going to have your fusion, and that fusion is God.
Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and jump ahead. 731. Margaret, if you'll read the section 4, those first 2 paragraphs, because for anyone who actually does know science, they've heard of this Coulomb law.
Okay. The Coulomb law raises the most momentous questions of all time, questions which the greatest logicians of history have been unable to solve. Mathematics will not solve them with equations, which are but assumptions. No human can solve that supreme mystery except one who knows the cosmic source and cause of all things. It is small wonder that Newton was deceived. His senses perceived that an apple fell to the ground. He did not perceive that as the apple fell, its equal in potential arose simultaneously from the ground, and sequentially the entire apple arose from the ground and its equal potential fell to it.
So let's pause for a moment there, the panel. So I wanted to chuckle because I thought that one was very interesting, okay? Because we all know that in science, when a discovery is made, that then changes kind of the nature of how everybody else builds onto it. And this is actually depicted, Joey, if we can pull up slide 40, this is a great reminder, I thought, of the things that we cannot see. And so, Jim, if you'll comment on this particular painting, it's got the 2 funnel clouds there together.
Yeah, that's the inward compression and the outward expansion in that particular case, an atomic explosion. He pointed that out in his writings too. He pointed out that when they have atomic explosions above the ground, the equal amount of expansive inward in the Earth goes into the Earth, radiates as waves in the Earth, and eventually will radiate back to the point where it came in and cause earthquakes. And we've had a major expansion around the world in earthquakes since we've had atomic power. Let me give you a real quick example that may help people, and you can make this at home. It's so easy. Get 2 pieces of wire, tape them together on the ends, place them in your palms. There's a flat plane right there. That's the divide. There's no pressure. Start applying pressure, and as you apply pressure inward, it's going to apply pressure outward on your palms, and you'll watch it go through the lens stages until it becomes spherical. You can feel the outward desire to expand. You can see the sphere at the top, but you can't feel that. That's the expansion. That's the part that you don't see. But this, if you do this, realize what an in-breath is. An in-breath is compression inward with equal and opposite compression outward, and you'll feel that in your hands.
Okay.
Just flat to zero, flat to sphere, from flat to sphere.
Is this what you're talking about, Jim? Take a look. Is this what you're talking about right here? So I've got a flat, and so this is what you're talking about.
Yes, but you have 2 wires. So
I would have 2 wires. Okay.
Right, and taped at the ends together, and then as you push inward, they're going to move towards sphere. They can only move towards sphere, and when they reach absolute sphere, then the only way to release that pressure is to let it go back outward again.
Okay, so I want to go back right quick. I'll come back, Margaret. I want to go back to image 40. So image 40 is something that really struck home with me when I came into the Waynesboro Museum, because there was something just so incredibly powerful, and it was showing what was showing both sides. But I also wanted to bring up page 40, slide 41, Joey, because this was a picture that went viral for a pilot took this. And we are used to, as human beings, only seeing half the rainbow. And what the pilot was showing us is that the rainbow is, in fact, spherical. Margaret?
Boy, I can't explain it. That's a mystery to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So did we lose John, Joey? I guess we lost one of our panel members. Okay, we're working on the technical issues. So I would ask the team, let's go on down to page 732, because this is a very important phrase, and probably the most challenging part of coming up with what we do on each night is the fact that there's so much to cover. In fact, even Karen was working on the video and she's like, yeah, this is a lot to do, but this is important. If I would, Jim, if you would please read that middle of 732, you're going to see by the blue, just read those first few sentences there, a greater knowledge of.
A greater knowledge of the light wave and its cycles is therefore necessary, for we again say that the secrets of the universe lie within the wave. As light waves have their 9-octave multiplying power to bring invisible light to negligible heat into a visible, intensely hot suns and nebulae, and as international science is still unaware of the process, we are revealing it as our step-by-step way of completing our roadmap to space.
Okay, and then it goes on to say, heretofore we have said that the universe consists of the undivided universe of rest. So let's pause there for a moment. The undivided universe of rest. You might want to go ahead and jot that down in the chat box, because that's a very important phrase. That's why it's in all caps. They're screaming at us, right? And the divided universe of motion. Undivided universe of rest and divided universe of motion. Panel, what does that mean?
What they're telling us, and what the Walter is illustrating in science, is that they never consider the expansion factor. They only consider the compression factor, and therefore they're only seeing half of what science has to reveal and what the secrets have to reveal. And in this part, he's relating to Krishna, who spoke of the divided, undivided, but didn't really understand the divided. Spoke of the divided, but didn't ever talk of the undivided. So he wanted to clarify that second half of that message. And as he says in that next paragraph, we will talk about it more later. But, in terms of this, it's like realizing the undivided is rest, right? That's God at rest. But within that rest is it's love. Right? When you're at rest, when you're at peace, you're in love, you're at peace. So in that state of rest is a desire to express the joy of love. And in that expression, we call it duality in our universe that we live in. So it's all made from love. And that's why love is such a strong force in life. To put love in everything you do, to try and see people in a loving way, to consider things with the light of love, you usually don't come up with bad things. So I really like that they illustrate that God is love and God is undivided. And in that context, Walter refers to, and Leo referred to, there is no opposite word for love. It took me a long time to figure that out and just contemplate that. Like, there's no opposite word for love. And the reason, the best way I can explain it is love says yes, love also says no. But hate always just says no. It's one-dimensional. Love is it's infinite in its dimensions. And hate is so one-dimensional. And that's why it cannot be its counterpart, because it doesn't equal love. So in that context, there is no other word in the English language to the opposite for love. And that's something worth thinking about. And God is love. That's why there's no opposite.
All right. So, Margaret, anything you want to add to that before I go to the top of page 733?
Yes, the undivided universe, if you look at the sun, the university had a science call a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about the sun. And Darren, the science officer, former science officer, he said if you could see it, there's actually a 3-meter hole in the center of the sun that's absolutely still. So that's the undivided. And then the motion all around it is the divided universe. So that's kind of amazing to think of that, because the center of the sun is actually a whole. It's still.
Yes. Okay, very powerful. And in fact, I'm going to try to go ahead and put it in the chat box. They do have a wonderful scientific group that meets once a month. I'm going to go ahead and place it right here for any of you that want to dive more into it. There may be some people who just must love science. So let's go on to the top of to page 733. And they're talking about this. They're talking about this new two-way principle accounts for simultaneously the invisible swing of the pendulum from its zero of stillness to its compression focus and back again through expansion. Okay, through expansion. It also accounts for the voidance principle, which makes of this universe an imagined one in which everything happening anywhere is voided by its equal unhappening everywhere. And it counts for the motion picture universe of illusion. So let me just ask the panel right quick about this. Comment on that particular paragraph. That's a big one. It goes on to talking about it a little bit more. We could do a whole session just on this concept. So let's just agree to that. Jim, what do you think is important for newer students that are listening to take away from this?
See the simplicity in the science. They're constantly presenting it to you. It's one of the reasons that people say to most of us students is they seem to repeat themselves. No, they don't. They further compress their thinking as they go through it. They're constantly reminding you of what they stated and what is transpiring. The whole course is from expansion and zero in meditation to compression in the science, and an understanding of both as equal and opposites of each other. I don't know any other way to say it than that.
Okay, lovely. Margaret, anything you want to add?
Oh gosh, that's so hard to explain. It really is. I don't think I can really add to that.
Okay. Well,
I'd like to share a little bit on that. I just think it's such a great simplicity, as Jim was just saying. Go back to the seesaw and think of the fulcrum. Right? Whenever you move that seesaw, someone has to give in to give out. Otherwise, the seesaw won't work. So that's what this is telling you. Everything that's happening anywhere is unhappening everywhere. So this is that duality and why it's light and why we go back to that cube, right? And think of the cube as mirrors, one-way mirrors that light cannot escape from, but matter can squeeze out of. But that light is being reflected in that mirror. So as it's happening, it's unhappening. You go back to that diagram, you see the blue and the red. The red is happening, the blue is unhappening. And so it really simplifies that the illusion of what we anchor onto and believe that which is real because I can touch it and feel it, when the reality of it is, the only thing that's real is the idea of anything. That's a heck of a thought, but think about it. The reality of anything is only the idea of it, and the idea of it can never be manifested in the product. The idea of a Van Gogh painting is only a representation of what Van Gogh saw in his mind. It cannot be what Van Gogh saw in his mind. It's a copy. It's an illustration. It's a projection from what he saw. Same thing with the Moonlight Sonata and Mozart. It's a projection, right? So in that sense, when you hear that Moonlight Sonata, you're not hearing what Beethoven heard. You're hearing what you hear as an individual unit. And if it inspires you, then you're touching that classical realm. But the bottom line is you're only hearing a rendition. Okay? Well, is that okay?
It makes a lot of sense. And I want to just pause us all for a moment that we actually deal with these things every day. And so, Joey, if we'll pull up slide 37, this idea of the winding and unwinding is something that we do in something as simple. There is something as simple as a screwdriver there on 37 and 38. Okay, so we understand this. Go on to 38. And then it even goes back to child's play. For any of you remember on slide 39 there, remember ballerina music box. Same kind of thing, the winding and the unwinding, the winding and unwinding. So what I find so interesting to the panel, I just wanted to have us all slow down and look at the panel for a moment, is we actually interact with these concepts every day, do we not?
Yeah, can we go back to the screwdriver handle? The handle on the screwdriver?
37?
Yes. So think about it now. If you want to tighten that screw, which way do you turn it? You turn it clockwise. So right to tighten, And when you want to take it out, you loosen it, you turn it left. So righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, that is a mechanical principle. If you're in mechanics and the mechanics are working in construction and so forth like that, you know the term righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Well, that is the simplicity of creation. Concentration, decentration, tighten, untighten. And that is as simple as it gets. God screws it, turns to the right to create matter. And then within that same seed of that matter is the pattern to unwind and unscrew so that it is as though it never was.
Okay. So I want to go ahead, Margaret. And while Margaret's talking, I'm going to pull up the image that puts all of this on one page together, and we fixed it. So
Actually, you know the beautiful image of the circular rainbow? Yes. I was thinking that could represent one of the locking points on the very first image. In other words, the cones are moving through one another, and the rainbow is representing a locking point. It's a period of resistance between the inward motion and the outward motion.
Okay, I love that.
And that's pretty clever, Margaret. I like that too.
It could be. It could be.
Well, and that's what was so magical to me about the Russell work, is that when you got out of your own way and you didn't get yourself hung up on all the science, but you instead enjoyed it and said to the creator, please show me what you want me to know. Everything that I'm showing, all of a sudden it just starts popping up everywhere. And all of a sudden you walk through the world with just an unbelievable greater understanding for like, oh my goodness, it's been here in front of me all this time, and it's so incredibly powerful. And that's part of why, I went back. So Ken, we went ahead back and already fixed this image and changed it life and refold. So we took away the word death. But for me, this is just a diagram from Kimberly Faith. Okay, that was my attempt to try to capture a number of these things, because that's where we're getting ready to go in just a moment. Very, very powerful. So team,
honey, can you read the next paragraph? Because I think it says so much about what we're talking about. It gives a great illustration of that.
So
on 733.
So saying that it accounts for the motion picture of stillness?
Correct.
Okay, it accounts for the motion picture universe of illusion, which many great thinkers have suggested as a probability for if the light of man's cinema were turned off, the sequential stills which constitute the illusion of motion would disappear. So also would the sequential waves of light of the cosmic cinema of the creator's thinking disappear into blank space. So let me just pause for a moment there, Ken, because we've all seen those things as children where, when somebody takes a still, I need to get one of these picture books, but we've seen somebody draw, and then what they do is they flip the pages and it makes it look like it's motion. That's exactly what we're talking about here, is it not?
Yes, it is.
All right.
Except imagine those pages moving on a photon 1 trillion times per second, trillion revolutions per second. And that's how fast stuff gets.
And, there's just one other aspect too. We think of the sun as being so huge, right? But the sun is actually equal to the mass that's in space that surrounds it. And I don't know if you ever saw the image of the Voyager 1 looking back toward Earth, and or actually looking back toward the sun, and it's a teeny dot. And the Voyager machine actually has been far out into space. It's been traveling since the 1970s. It still has not hit the end of the sun's influence in the universe. But if you take all of the mass of all of that empty space, it's equivalent to the mass of the sun. So in other words, God's universe is balanced.
And the beauty of what Margaret's saying, and it's a little bit advanced, but literally there is a cube around the sun. It has a cube wave boundary field like we're talking about. You can't see the cube. You look up in the sky, you see all those stars, but every one of those stars has a cube wave boundary field around it that keeps it from colliding with other stars. And what Margaret was talking about in the Voyager is when it gets out the gravitational force field of the sun, then it'll go into the next galaxy, but Voyager 2. So, and that's a great illustration, Margaret.
Actually, Ken, it won't be able to even pass that boundary. It'll disintegrate.
Well, that's when they say they'll lose it, right? When they hit that boundary, then it'll be
All
at
right,
loss.
it'll disintegrate it because that's absolute stillness.
Yeah,
So
I guess
it
I'm
can't-
sorry
it
I said
can't
into the
pass
next
through it.
galaxy.
Yeah.
But yes,
So
that was
I'm going to invite
incorrect.
everybody who's listening in right now to go ahead and put in the chat box right quick before we continue. I'm going to go about another 10 minutes before we show the video. Please put in the chat box, how are you feeling right now? Are you feeling excited, uplifted, confused, mind blown? What is the feeling that you're having? And just see, and Margaret, you've got a lovely compliment. You are looking beautiful tonight, Margaret. Isn't her light shining brightly?
Yes.
Oh,
Light is shining incredibly bright. But I want to just ask everybody listening for right now, what are you feeling? Just give us one word. What are you feeling right now? Because for me, if I were to put one word down, it would be curious. I'm curious about where all of this is taking us. I'm curious. Cindy also agrees with Karen, Margaret, that you look fabulous. So there it is, consensus that Margaret looks fabulous. We're continuing with that. And that's part of why we have right now, you hear so many people talking about inviting more and more light in, because many, many people are shining even brighter. All right, so I'm waiting.
honey, can I just illustrate one point before we move on? It'll be just a second. Really, in this last paragraph we just read, think about what we just read. It's just like going to the theater. And the main point of that is to just contemplate for a while, because it does take some time, but contemplate. If God stopped thinking, the universe of duality would cease to exist. So that's why we call it a creating universe, not a created. And that's why also we read in a paragraph, there will be no death of the universe. We're not going into a red death, an expansive death, that there was some big bang. That would be like saying that God was born and God's going to die, when God represents the three omnis, right? That's omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent. There's no beginnings and no endings. God just is, as Lev would say. God is.
Well, and the power of what Ken just said, this is a creating universe. Think about the power of those three letters, I-N-G, a creating universe. And so that really shows us all the potential of power that we have. So right now, the feelings that we have is digesting, interesting. So interesting, notice the three letters again, I-N-G, it means it's in motion. So as we wind down here, remember, none of that we're doing here in this broadcast will ever replace your sitting down with your creator and however it is that you define it and having your study time, because this is a self-study course. So I want to go, Jim's cheering us on here. I want to go back to that. What this is simply a way to encourage you to dive into these concepts. So remember, it is your divine birthright to understand these things. And if you are brought to us in this moment, okay, that is your soul saying you're ready for this. So even if your human brain is going, oh, alert, 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 this is a lot, your soul self is saying you are meant to be right here. So you're exactly where you're meant to be. Jim, are you with me on that?
100%.
Well said. Well said.
So I want to encourage us all, because, that's the challenge for all of us when we decided to do this broadcast every Sunday night, is there's no way we can cover everything. We'd have to keep you on here for hours and hours and hours. I mean, I could barely keep Jim up past 9. So that just wouldn't work. Right. Okay. So we have a little bit of fun. Yes.
This also is a paragraph that really illustrates why it's a thought wave universe, right? If God stopped thinking, the universe, the world we live in, would cease to exist. And that's how you really get the grasp. This is a thought wave universe. Everything we see are thoughts that came from love, which is another term of saying God. So it's a thought wave universe, just like the cinema is a film wave universe. This is a thought wave universe. So it's really beautiful weighed out with that. That really illustrates the thought wave universe to me.
I love that. I'd like to bring up Karen Mahan's comment. She says, I'm grateful that you are all up to being here doing this. That's how I feel. So happy. Karen. It is our great joy. It is our great joy. All right. So we won't have time to dive into these concepts, but I do want to take us to the top of 734. And I want to encourage you all to take a screenshot. This isn't important because we're going to dive more into it later. It refers to the fact that there you'll see on the pops of 7. All right. Scroll up just a little bit, Joey, because I want them to see the image below it at the same time. So just a little bit so they can see those bubbles, right? Okay. So they were referring to science, and it was talking about also it is not discovered that there are 4 pairs of gravity poles on each gravity bar instead of only 1 pair on its ends. We will dive much more into that later. I simply want you all to have mentally noted this because this goes back to the cosmic pendulum. If you can read and count to 9, you can master the secrets of the universe. I would like to go ahead and come down here to page 736 because this is where this particular image shows up in the home study course. And that you see us keep referring to this particular image, 736, when it's figure 41. And Jim, I was wondering if you could read the bottom there, and I'm going to have Joey pull up the slide 30 at the same time that we're talking about this. But Jim, what does it say there on the bottom underneath that diagram?
This illustrates the parallel effect of the properly wound solenoid coil, the sex principle of nature. It
also indicates its relation to the spectrum of the sun, in which the white-centered yellow divides the red and blue sides of the sun. So the reason I had Joey pull up slide 30 here is because this is why it was so helpful to people to see that diagram colorized. Anything you want to say about that, Jim, before we wrap up here this evening?
Well, it's showing you male-female balance, and that when they are equal and opposite to each other, they void each other, and divinity is present. So that's why that the masculine embodied being should not repress the outer feminine through female and the inner feminine in themselves, nor should the feminine repress the masculine. It's both seeing the need and desire, having the need and desire to love and be equal, see the other as their equal reflection, and that's when divinity is born.
Okay, I love that. If we could bring up Bonnie's comment, because Bonnie brings up something, and I appreciate your courage, Bonnie, for saying this. She says, I'm just looking forward to watching what the universe shows me for further understanding, because I'm lost on some of this stuff. Bonnie, I would completely agree. When I first went through the home study course, I was lost on much of it. And I'm now into my 4th year. It makes so much more sense, and it really makes life more exciting. For me, it made life more exciting. Can any of you comment back when you were students early on? Can you relate to some of the people who are listening that are just learning some of the Russell things?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can, because I remember trying to read The Secret of Light and getting very frustrated and putting it down, and then going back a week later and trying again and then putting it down. And then I'd go back to something that was simpler, like God will work with you but not for you. And then I could try and go back to The Secret of Light. So
yes,
you do have to go back and forth to try and digest it.
And it's important, I think, to get out of your human need to understand everything, because truly, if that is part of what this journey is about. Remember, I keep referring to this as a big cosmic treasure hunt, a cosmic scavenger hunt. Isn't that the joy of what we're doing? Is going, oh my goodness, now I understand what that illustration means. Oh my goodness, this is how it shows up. Oh, the next time I'm screwing and fixing a cabinet, oh, now I get that. So I'm curious, and Ken, you said at the beginning, and then I'm going to have us end here on the bottom of page 738. You said at the beginning that you actually avoided some of the science, and now you are in the process of discovering the power of the science.
Absolutely. It's to me it was just intuitive to the same thing. I had a little balk of science and lack of academic education, and none of that was true. But I also believe that the philosophy needed to come before the science. So many people I saw and have seen through the years that I watched YouTube and things that are around there, they're all into the science, but they don't know the philosophy. And if you know the philosophy and don't know the science, you still only know half. So they are meant to be combined. Remember, science is religion is female and science is male. That's a beautiful, beautiful formula. That's just a wonderful formula. So just remember that. I think that was that I have to say was the first time I pulled that out of there and gotten that religion was male. Excuse me, female, and that science was male. That to me just makes well. That's why we need to know science, because we need to know the male side of God. Just like we need to have that spiritual foundation, because we need to know the female side of God, which is the love side to me.
So Karen, you're unlike you are always into science. You are the science girl. So you enjoy the science, and that's part of what you brought in your visual journey that we're getting ready to go. What has been your journey? This is the first time you've been going through the home study course. I just wanted to have others relate to you. What has it been like for you to learn things in a new fashion like this?
I love the philosophy. I didn't really look at it from, I mean, I understood the God part, but I'm actually cementing actually of the science by going through the course. So it's actually quite lovely that way. But it's just like Tesla said, what one people call physics, somebody else calls God. So I've understood.
Love that. So at the bottom of page 738, I wanted to just end with a sentence before we show the visual journey.
Margaret had her hand up, love, when you looked down.
I'm sorry, I couldn't see everybody on the screen. Yes, Margaret.
Oh, well, I was thinking of giving and re-giving. You know, the sun radiates the heat, and when it hits the earth, it's actually charging the earth. So it's interesting that the sun would radiate, but it's actually having a more of a compressive or charging effect on the earth. So that kind of illustrates the simultaneity of that action.
Love that.
It also illustrates there is no death, right? You would say the sun is dying, and that also illustrates the optical universe when we come back to the beginning. So good for you, Margaret, because when those sun rays get to Earth that are 90 million miles away, they are cold. They are not warm. They're long rays. And what happens is our atmosphere acts as that magnifying glass, as that compressor. It literally compresses the long rays that come from the sun by the time they get to their cold and charges them into short rays, which, like Margaret says, gives all life. So everything that exists on this planet started in the sun. And so therefore that's why there's no death. You would say the sun's dying, but as Margaret just said, but that's what gives life to Earth. So it's not dying. It just each is re-giving and giving and re-giving, and it's an endless cycle. It's an eternal cycle.
Well, so if we could, for everybody who's listening, I just wanted to pop down to the bottom of page 738, because there's a really important phrase there. And it says, nature has no precedent for that action. It was referring to the things above. For all motion is spiral. So if you could, can you please jot that down in the chat box? All motion is spiral. This is important when you're beginning to really refigure what your brain is. The directional movement in all planets is centrifugal. So the main thing is all motion is spiral. One of the biggest inhibitors I see in humanity is that they get very, very stuck that the world is linear. And the conversation that I have so many times with people is the fact that the world is circular, and even more so now, I would begin to say it's spiral. And if you begin to understand that, everything else begins to make sense. So relax, please, into what we're getting ready to show you with the visual journey. The power of this is this. Remember that some of you, it may not be meant for you to understand all of this. It may be meant for you to pass on to your grandchild, your grandson, or your granddaughter who's actually studying science, a new way to learn it. Perhaps you simply hand somebody the man who tapped, and their soul will take them on a journey to the new science that's meant to anchor here on the earth. So powerful stuff. Sit back, relax, and tune in to this visual journey. It's a little longer than some of the others, but it's going to be a relief to your brain as you simply enjoy the music and enjoy the visuals. Thank you, Karen. Let's enjoy. My goodness, Karen. What a beautiful gift. What a beautiful gift. Just another lovely way. Jim, if you'll come off mute, Ken, come off mute. What a lovely gift. And just want to thank you so much, Margaret. If you'll come off mute. Just want to say a gracious thank you. Karen pours her love into us every single week, creating this gift of love. And Karen, it is so incredibly helpful. And want to make sure you all know that every visual journey you've seen with every episode is actually on the YouTube channel for you to enjoy, however fast or slow that you want to enjoy it. So final thoughts here. I know we're running late. Wanted to mention to you, if we'll go to slide 15. So do know that we will be back next Sunday, right on track, every Sunday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You'll see a lot more, and just simply come in with that curiosity. But do know that for the month of March and April, we are doing an extra Tuesday night extra. So I want to say thank you to everyone. On the next slide, you joined me last week where I simply did the Russell timeline. And I wanted to point out to you that there on our YouTube channel, there is an actual playlist. If you go to playlist, you can see all the extra episodes that we're pulling together as a gift of love. Do know that this coming Tuesday, John's going to be sharing the gift with us. He's going to be talking about, if we'll go there to slide 17, you're going to see his contribution there about what we're going to do on March 11th. He'll be talking about Dr. Russell's lecture series. The following week, we'll have Ken. He'll be talking about his journey with the man who tapped. And then the following week is Jim, and he'll be talking about the Divine Iliad. And so then we have Karen after that. And then Margaret will let us know if she ever wants to do a special edition, but that's where we're at right now. So I do want to just mention here, if we would, and just go back to the panel, we're working on a number of other things. Any final thoughts? I have one final thought before we close. I'm giving anyone last chance to raise their hand.
Yeah, I got a final thought, my love.
Yes.
You look beautiful tonight. I just want to tell you how much I love you. That's it.
Thank you, my love. And you know what's really funny that he says that is I actually was going to say that what the home study course has done for me is that when you do love somebody, and we're in the middle of our own love experience that you all are experiencing, when you fall in love, you want to know everything about someone. You want to know what makes them tick, what makes them excited, what makes them happy. And may this home study course in the science section invite us all to fall in love with the universe. So let that be our final thought tonight. May we all fall in love with the universe. So everyone have a beautiful evening. Can't thank you enough for hanging with us. We'll see you next time.
Good night, everybody.
Night.